Welcome to the Metal Verbalizers podcast. There are a lot of hardworking musicians and great music in underground metal. We want to support this, so we started this podcast. We also want to share the great underground music with you listening. If you enjoy this podcast, your support is very important, because the more people who find us, the more we can support the bands that we verbalize. In this episode, I will introduce a band by talking about the band's sound, influences, lyrics, name, future plans, and more. I am Johan Verbalizer, and this episode will be dedicated to the band Venus. Venus is a progressive technical thrash metal band from Greece and was started in 2022. I'm not entirely sure about the exact terminology here. I've seen Venus being referred to as both progressive thrash and technical thrash, so I thought that mentioning both would make sense. The members of Venus had known each other long before actually starting this band. It was already back in 2021 that they started writing music together that would later become the first songs of Venus. But the band considered 2022 as the time when Venus was officially started, because that's when they released the band's first EP, titled Project Lambda. After this EP, the band immediately started to work on a full-length album and released the band's first album, Obscured Until Observed, the year after in 2023. I believe that this is very impressive. Not only do they have so many great ideas, but releasing EPs and full-length albums require a lot of work. Much more work than just writing and recording. Those are big parts of it, of course, but there's a lot more work to be done until you're finished. So I think this says a lot about how serious Venus is. As I was saying, Venus is a very hard-working band, and even though the band started writing music in 2021, the band managed to release an EP, Project Lambda, the next year in 2022. Then in 2023 they released the single Circus Strange, as well as the single The Artificially Prolonged Existence. And then the same year in 2023, they released the album Obscured Until Observed. So again, as I was saying, Venus seems like a very, very hard-working band, and it also seems like they have a lot of plans for next year as well. So if they keep this up, it seems like Venus is going to be able to pretty much release music every single year, which is almost what they have actually done so far, with the exception being 2021, which was technically the time when they started actually writing music. But yeah, I think that considering how actually consistent they seem with the releases, I'm very, very excited to see the future of Venus discography. When it comes to the main influences of Venus, the band is taking influences from a wide range of styles, like Vector, Death, Immortal, Blind Guardian, and Savatage, as a way to try making something unique. If you're looking for some great thrash metal that is certainly not afraid to test boundaries, you may have just found the perfect band in the shape of Venus. Venus is mixing aggressive thrash with melodic metal, which gives it a really cool sound that I would compare to bands like Skeleton Witch, and it even reminds me of bands like 3 Inches of Blood sometimes. I think Venus has a very good tempo. They're not playing super fast, but I think that the tempo of Venus fits the overall music very well. The song length tends to be relatively long. On the first EP, Project Lambda, no song is under 5 minutes, and the longest is like 9.5. On the full length Obscured Until Observed, The shortest song is about 4.5, and the longest is like 11.5. So the shortest song is shorter than on the EP, and the longest song is longer than on the EP, so it has an even wider range. The image of Venus can be generally summarized as epic sci-fi that plays with your mind. For example, the very sci-fi looking logo with sharp edges that also gives it a very thrash look. It's also very prominent in the band's artwork and lyrics, with the kinda sci-fi theme and the sci-fi style. Speaking of lyrics, Venus isn't the kind of band that is very strict about exact lyrical themes, but the themes tend to revolve around sci-fi stories mixed with philosophy about existence, consciousness, and like breaking free from this plane of reality, etc. Venus likes to write sci-fi stories and use that as lyrics, such as the songs Sons of Grus and City of Nectron, which could at least partly explain why some of the songs are relatively long, because you need to be able to finish the story before the song can end, unless you divide it into different parts or something, but even then you still need some kind of beginning and an end for each song, even in that case. So that could be at least partly an explanation to why they have a lot of generally relatively long songs, which is something that I think is a pretty cool thing. When it comes to why the band chose Venus as the band name, has to do with both the planet Venus and the goddess Venus. Considering the band's sci-fi theme, naming the band after a planet of course makes a lot of sense, but it has a little bit of a deeper meaning than that. The planet Venus, being one of the hottest planets, is meant to symbolize the band's aggressive side. The goddess Venus, being the goddess of love, is meant to symbolize the band's melodic side. So the name Venus makes a lot of sense. And I really like this kind of idea behind the meaning of the band name. And I think that, again, as I said, like considering the sci-fi theme, like having something with space or planets makes total sense. And I really like this kind of explanation that they're kind of like a little bit deeper idea behind the name. Things like that is very interesting to me, and it's something that I really appreciate. When it comes to the future of Venus, the band is hard at work with their upcoming album. The pre-production is almost ready, and the band is planning to enter the studio very soon. But as I've stated before, soon is a very ambiguous term. It could mean almost anything. But like previously mentioned as well, Venus has worked very fast before. The band seems really happy with the new music so far. They even believe that this will be the best and most epic Venus album to date. These are my thoughts and comments about the band, but now I'd like to hear your thoughts. What do you think about Venus? Do you have a favorite song by this band? If so, which one? Let us know in the YouTube comments or on social media. We have now reached the end of this episode. It means a lot to me that you've been listening all the way to the end. I really appreciate that. If you want to support us, great ways of doing so are subscribing on YouTube, as well as following on Spotify, Facebook and Instagram. And while you're on Spotify, feel free to also rate the podcast, as well as generally liking, commenting and sharing. All this can be done very quickly, very easily, and completely free. But it would really help the podcast and the bands that we verbalize. So we would be very thankful. We will be back to verbalize again next week.